Chapter 1. A quiet man steps forward. The bell over the diner door chimed softly every time someone came or went, but by Tuesday evening it had settled into long stretches of silence. The quiet didn't bother Miles Kennedy. He preferred it. The low hum of refrigeration, the occasional scrape of a chair, the soft rhythm of a spatula on the grill. It all put him at ease. Comfort didn't have to be loud. That was something his parents had taught him early and often. Miles wiped down the counter with slow, steady strokes, his mind drifting in the easy way it did when nothing demanded urgency. A couple sat in the far booth sharing a milkshake. Someone near the window flipped through a paperback they'd been reading for weeks. Ordinary, uncomplicated moments. The kind of moments Miles built his entire life around. He glanced up out of habit more than intention, and that's when he saw the boy. At first, it didn't register as anything unusual. Kids passed by all the time, especially in the late afternoon. But this boy wasn't passing. He was stopping. Miles leaned slightly toward the window without moving from his place behind the counter. The boy, maybe 8 or 9, approached a man walking by and said something. The man bent down, listened briefly, then shook his head and kept walking. The boy turned immediately to the next person. Another attempt. Another refusal. Miles' hand slowed where it moved across the counter. There was something off about it. Not persistence, that was normal enough. It was the urgency. The way the boy didn't hesitate between rejections, like he didn't have time to feel them. The boy approached a woman this time. She crouched down longer, her face soft with concern. But in the end, she did the same thing. A small shake of her head, a few apologetic words, and then she moved on. The kid stood frozen for a second after she left. Just a second. Then he tried again. Miles exhaled slowly through his nose, the kind of breath he took when something asked for his attention but didn't quite demand it yet. "What is it?" Rachel asked from the register, glancing over. Miles nodded toward the window. "Just watching something." Rachel followed his gaze, squinting faintly. "Kid looks like he's having a bad day." "That's one way to put it," Miles murmured. Outside, the boy tried again. This time the conversation didn't last long. The passerby barely slowed before continuing on. When the boy turned away, something in his posture finally broke. He sank down on the edge of the sidewalk, elbows on his knees, face buried in his hands. His shoulders shook, small and tight, like he was trying to keep the sound in. That was the moment something inside Miles shifted. He didn't rush, he never did, but the decision was already made. "I'm stepping out for a minute," he said, setting the cloth down. Rachel gave him a knowing look. "Take your time." Miles stepped around the counter, pushed through the door, and the bell above chimed behind him as he moved into the cooling evening air. Up close, the boy looked even smaller. "Hey," Miles said gently, stopping a few feet away so he wouldn't startle him. The boy flinched anyway, his head snapping up. His eyes were wide, too wide, and wet with tears he hadn't quite managed to keep contained. For a second, he looked ready to run. Then something in Miles' expression must have convinced him otherwise. "What's going on?" Miles asked, crouching down slightly to meet him closer to eye level. The words came out in a rush. "My mom. She won't wake up and my sister's there, and I don't know what to do, and we don't have a phone, and I tried to ask people but nobody would come in." "Hey," Miles said softly, steady but firm enough to slow him down. "Okay, that's okay. We'll figure it out." The boy stared at him, breathing hard. "Where is your mom?" Miles asked. "At home," the boy said quickly. "It's just a few blocks. She's not moving." Miles was already pulling his phone out. "What's the address?" The boy rattled it off, his words trembling over each other. Miles repeated it once under his breath, then dialed. His voice was calm when he spoke to the dispatcher. Clear, efficient. He gave them exactly what they needed, no more, no less. When they asked questions, he answered. When they needed confirmation, he gave it. The boy hovered close, as if afraid that stepping away might undo everything. "They're on their way," Miles said when he hung up. A fragile kind of relief flickered across the boy's face, but it didn't stay. "I have to go back," the boy insisted. "My sister's alone." Miles nodded once. "Okay, I'll go with you." The boy hesitated, uncertainty flashing again. "It's all right," Miles said. "We'll go together." That was enough. They moved quickly, the boy leading, his small legs pushing him forward at a pace that had Miles lengthening his stride just to keep up. The apartment building wasn't far, but by the time they reached it, the urgency had thickened into something heavier. The boy didn't pause at the door. He ran inside. Miles followed. The stairwell smelled faintly of dust and something older, something worn into the walls after years of use. The boy took the steps 2 at a time, stopping abruptly outside one door and shoving it open. "Emma," he called. A girl sat on the floor inside, her back against the couch, eyes red but dry. She looked up immediately, relief crashing through her expression when she saw him. Then she noticed Miles. "Who is that?" she asked, wary. "He's helping," the boy said quickly. Miles stepped inside, closing the distance to where the woman lay stretched across the couch. Even before he touched her wrist, he could tell something wasn't right. Her skin was pale, her breathing shallow, but there, alive. Ambulance is on the way, Miles said calmly. The girl's shoulders trembled as if she'd been holding herself still for too long. She just wouldn't wake up. I know, Miles said gently. They're coming now. You did the right thing. He glanced up at the boy, offering the same reassurance without words this time. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Miles stayed where he was, steady and grounded, one hand resting lightly against the woman's wrist, counting the seconds between her breaths. He didn't know these people. He didn't know their story. But as the sirens grew louder, filling the space with something that sounded like both urgency and hope, Miles realized something simple and certain. He wasn't going anywhere. Chapter 2: The Man Who Stayed. The ambulance arrived in a rush of motion and clipped instructions, transforming the small apartment into something crowded and urgent. Paramedics moved with practiced efficiency, their calm sharper than the children's fear. Miles stepped back just enough to stay out of their way, but not so far that he disappeared from the edges of the moment. BP's low, one of them said. Pulse is there, but weak. Ma'am, can you hear me? The woman didn't respond. The girl, Emma, wrapped her arms tightly around herself, her eyes darting between the paramedics and her mother. The boy hovered at Miles's side like he'd anchored himself there without quite realizing it. Miles rested a steady hand lightly on the boy's shoulder. Hey, he said quietly. What's your name? Noah, the boy whispered. Okay, Noah, Miles replied. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. Noah nodded, swallowing hard, like he wasn't entirely convinced but wanted to believe it. They worked quickly, lifting the woman onto a stretcher with careful coordination. One of the paramedics glanced toward Miles. You family? Miles paused just long enough to consider the simplest answer. No, he said. Then after a beat, but I'm here. The paramedic gave a short nod like that was sufficient for now. We're taking her to St. Vincent's. Kids need to come with us. Emma straightened at that, her jaw tightening. We're coming. Miles caught the flicker of uncertainty behind her resolve, the practical kind. Logistics. Fear of what came next. I'll follow, he said, meeting her eyes. You won't be alone. She hesitated, studying him with a sharpness that suggested she didn't trust easily. That's okay, Miles added, not pushing. You don't have to decide anything right now. Just stay with your mom. For a moment, Emma didn't speak. Then she gave a small, stiff nod. That was enough. The hospital waiting room carried its own kind of quiet, one made of held breath and unfinished thoughts. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, bright but somehow not comforting. Miles sat a few chairs away from the kids, not crowding them but not distant either. Emma sat upright, hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Noah leaned against her shoulder, the adrenaline clearly wearing off. Miles watched them for a moment, then stood. I'm going to grab something, he said. You two eaten? Emma shook her head automatically. We're fine. Miles nodded once, as if accepting what she'd said, but not agreeing with it. I'll be right back. He didn't wait for an argument. The vending machines buzzed impatiently as he fed bills into the slot. He came back with more than necessary, water, crackers, a couple of granola bars, and set them down on the empty chair beside them. Just in case, he said. Emma looked at the food, then at him. You don't have to. I know, Miles replied gently. That seemed to interrupt whatever protest she'd been preparing. Noah didn't hesitate. He reached for a granola bar, pausing only long enough to glance at Emma. When she didn't stop him, he tore it open with quiet urgency. Miles sat down again, folding his hands loosely together. What happened? Emma asked suddenly, her tone sharper than before. Why did you help him? It wasn't hostile exactly. More like she needed the answer to make sense of something. Miles considered the question. I saw him trying to ask people for help, he said simply. Looked important. That's it? She pressed. That's enough, usually. She studied him again, longer this time. Most people didn't stop. Miles tilted his head slightly. Most people don't think they're the one who should. Emma frowned at that, like she didn't quite understand it but didn't want to dismiss it either. Are you always like this? She asked. Like what? She gestured vaguely. Calm. Miles let out a soft breath that might have been a laugh. Mostly. That's weird, Noah mumbled through a mouthful of granola. Miles glanced over, a hint of amusement flickering across his face. Fair. Emma didn't smile. People don't just stay, she said, quieter now. The words landed somewhere deeper than the question before them. Miles didn't rush to answer. I'm not in a hurry to leave, he said after a moment. That didn't sound like a promise. It sounded like a choice. Emma looked down at her hands. Minutes stretched. The quiet returned, but it wasn't as heavy as before. Eventually, a doctor approached. Family of Lauren Hale? Emma and Noah both stood immediately. That's our mom, Emma said. The doctor nodded. She's stable. Severe dehydration and exhaustion. We're running some tests, but she responded well once we started fluids. The tension in the room shifted, not disappearing but easing just enough to breathe through. Can we see her? Noah asked. In a few minutes, the doctor said. She's waking up. Emma exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding that breath since she first saw her mother on the couch. Miles leaned back slightly, letting the moment belong to them. But when Emma glanced back at him, there was something different in her expression now. Less suspicion. More acknowledgement. "You can come too," she said, almost reluctantly. Miles raised an eyebrow slightly. "You sure?" She hesitated, then nodded. "You're already here." A small smile ghosted at the edge of his mouth. "That's true." Lauren Hale didn't look like someone who would admit weakness easily. Even propped up in a hospital bed, pale and still obviously drained, there was a sharpness to her gaze when she finally opened her eyes. Awareness came quickly, followed immediately by irritation. "Emma," she said, her voice dry but steady. "Why are we—" "You passed out?" Emma cut in, her composure slipping just a little. "You wouldn't wake up." Lauren blinked, processing. Her gaze shifted to Noah, then past him and landed on Miles. Her expression changed instantly. "Who are you?" she asked. Direct. No softness. Miles stepped forward just enough to be seen clearly without crowding her space. "Miles," he said. "I run the diner down the block." "That doesn't answer my question," she replied. "Noah came to get help," Miles said calmly. "I called the ambulance." Lauren's eyes flicked toward her son, something sharp in her expression softening just slightly. Then she looked back at Miles. "And you have followed us here?" she asked. "I said I would." Her brow furrowed faintly, like she wasn't sure whether that was reassuring or concerning. Emma crossed her arms. "He stayed with us." That seemed to matter. Lauren exhaled slowly, some of the rigid tension easing out of her shoulders. "All right," she said after a moment. "Thank you." It sounded like the kind of gratitude that didn't come easily. Miles inclined his head. "You're welcome." Silence settled again, but this one felt different. Less strained, more aware. Lauren glanced at the four-line, then back at her kids. "You two okay?" "We're fine," Emma said quickly. Noah nodded. "He got us snacks." Lauren's gaze flicked back to Miles, assessing. "You didn't have to do any of that." Miles shrugged lightly. "I know." She studied him for a long moment like she was searching for something, motive maybe, or expectation. "You always get this involved with strangers?" she asked. "Not always. And this time." Miles thought about it, then said simply, "Felt appropriate." For a second, Lauren just stared at him. Then, unexpectedly, a faint, tired smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "That's a strange answer." "Seems to be a theme," Miles said. The hint of humor lingered just long enough to soften the edges of the room. Lauren shifted slightly against the pillows, wincing faintly. "You should go," she said, though it lacked conviction. "You've done enough." Miles didn't argue, but he didn't stand immediately either. "I'll stop by tomorrow," he said instead. "Drop off some food." Lauren's expression sharpened again. "That's not necessary." "I know," Miles said, echoing his earlier words. "But it'll happen anyway." Emma huffed a quiet sound that might have been amusement. Lauren gave her a look before turning back to Miles. "You don't take hints, do you? Not the kind that aren't actually meant." For a moment, something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or reluctant recognition. "Tomorrow," she said finally, like she was conceding a small battle she hadn't intended to fight. "Fine. Once." Miles nodded. "Once is a good place to start." Noah smiled faintly at that. Miles stepped back, giving them space again. "Get some rest," he said. Lauren watched him for a moment longer, then gave a small nod. As he turned to leave, the quiet followed him out, but it wasn't empty anymore. And for the first time in a long while, Miles found himself wondering, not if he would come back tomorrow, but what exactly he was walking into when he did. Chapter 3: Unexpected Accounts. Miles arrived the next morning earlier than usual, not because the diner required it, but because his thoughts wouldn't stay still long enough to let him linger elsewhere. He moved through the quiet kitchen with practiced ease, flipping on lights, setting coffee to brew, sliding into the rhythm that had always steadied him. Cooking didn't demand overthinking. It rewarded attention, not anxiety. He'd always appreciated that. Still, his mind wandered. Not in a chaotic way, Miles didn't really do chaos, but with a quiet curiosity that kept circling back to a hospital room, a guarded woman, and two kids who had looked at him like he was something solid when the ground shifted beneath them. He wasn't used to that. "Morning, dreamer," his mother's voice called as she breezed through the back door, already tying her apron. Miles glanced over his shoulder. "Morning. You're early," she said, narrowing her eyes slightly. "That means something. Or I just woke up early," she hummed, unconvinced. "And the sky's green." Miles smiled faintly but didn't respond. She watched him for another moment, then softened. "What's going on?" Miles considered brushing it off. It would have been easy, default even, but that didn't quite fit today. "Met a kid last night," he said. "Needed help." His mother paused, her expression shifting immediately to concern. "What kind of help?" "His mom passed out, called an ambulance, stayed with them at the hospital." Her hand pressed lightly against her chest. "Oh, Miles. They're okay," he added. She's stable. His mother exhaled slowly. That's good. He nodded, already setting containers on the prep table. And you're going back, she said. It wasn't a question. Miles glanced up. Yeah. A smile touched her lips, soft but knowing. Of course you are. He didn't explain it further. He didn't need to. By late morning, Miles closed up the containers he'd prepared. Soup, sandwiches, something easy to reheat, something that didn't require effort. Food that said you don't have to struggle right now without making it sound like pity. He placed everything carefully into a sturdy bag, wiped his hands, and headed out. The hospital smelled the same as it had the night before, clean in a way that never quite erased the tension beneath it. Miles checked in, got the room number, and made his way upstairs. When he reached the door, he tapped lightly before stepping inside. Lauren was awake this time, sitting upright with a thin hospital blanket draped over her legs. She looked better, color returning, posture stronger, but there was still an edge of fatigue behind her eyes. Emma sat in the chair beside her, flipping through a magazine she clearly wasn't reading. Noah lay stretched across the small couch, one arm hanging off the side. All three of them looked up when Miles entered. Well, Lauren said, one eyebrow lifting. You weren't bluffing. Miles held up the bag slightly. Didn't seem like a situation for bluffing. Noah sat up almost immediately. That's food, right? Miles nodded. That's food. Emma gave her brother a look. Don't be rude. I'm being honest, Noah said. Lauren exhaled a faint sound that might have been amusement as she shook her head. Bring it over, she said, gesturing toward the small table. Miles unpacked everything with quiet efficiency, setting containers out like it was the most natural thing in the world. What all is this? Emma asked, leaning closer despite herself. Chicken soup, Miles said. Turkey sandwiches. Fruit. Nothing complicated. It smells good, Noah added, already reaching. Wait, Lauren said, though it lacked authority. That's more a suggestion than an order, Noah pointed out. Miles hid a small smile. Go ahead, Lauren relented, rubbing her temple lightly. But slow down. Noah didn't need encouragement beyond that. Emma followed more cautiously, but once she tasted the soup, her shoulders dropped in visible relief. Lauren watched them for a moment before her gaze shifted back to Miles. You didn't have to do this, she said. You've said that, Miles replied. And you keep ignoring it. He shrugged lightly. Consistency has its uses. She studied him again, searching. So what's the angle? Miles paused, genuinely considering the question. There isn't one, he said. Lauren let out a faint laugh, disbelieving, but not harsh. There's always an angle. Not always. You don't even know us. Miles leaned back slightly against the chair he'd pulled over. I know enough. That's a dangerous philosophy. It hasn't caused problems yet. That you know of. Miles tilted his head. You're awake, your kids are eating, and you're not dealing with any of it alone today. Seems like things worked out all right. Lauren blinked, caught off guard by the simplicity of it. Emma glanced between them, her lips twitching slightly like she was trying not to smile. He does that, she said quietly. Does what? Lauren asked. Answers things like it's obvious, Emma said. Miles looked at her. Isn't it? Emma shook her head. No, it just sounds like it when you say it. That's convenient, Noah added around a mouthful of sandwich. Lauren sighed, but there was less tension in it now. You run a diner, she said, shifting the subject. That your full-time thing? Yeah. Busy. Enough. That's not an answer. Miles met her gaze. It's the answer I have. She stared at him, then huffed softly. You're impossible to get a straight read on. Or I'm straightforward in a way that doesn't match expectations. That's another strange answer. Seems consistent. Emma laughed quietly at that, unable to help it. Lauren shot her a look but didn't follow through with it. Instead, she leaned back slightly, her posture loosening without her realizing it. You plan on turning this into a regular thing? She asked, nodding toward the food. Miles shook his head. No. Her brow lifted, surprised. No, not like this, he clarified. You'll be out of here soon. After that, if you're open to it, you can stop by the diner. Lauren narrowed her eyes slightly. And pay you for food I don't need? You'll need food. That's not the point. Miles nodded once. Then call it something else. Like what? He considered it. Taste testing. Emma blinked. Taste testing. Miles gestured lightly. I make food. You give opinions. It's a fair exchange. That's not even close to fair, Lauren said. It's close enough. No, it isn't. Miles didn't argue. Then adjust it, he said. But you won't be obligated. Lauren crossed her arms slowly, studying him like she was trying to find the flaw in the structure he was building. You're very calm about people pushing back, she said. Not everything needs to be a fight. That's not how most people work. I've noticed. Silence settled again, but softer this time. Emma picked at her soup, glancing at her mother. You should say yes, she said. Lauren looked at her. Emma, it's not charity if he gets something, Emma continued. You said that yourself. Lauren opened her mouth, then paused. That's not what I meant, she said, though her voice lacked heat. Emma shrugged. Still applies. Noah nodded enthusiastically. And the food's really good. Lauren pressed her lips together, clearly outnumbered. Miles didn't step in. He just waited. That, more than anything, seemed to settle the decision. Fine, Lauren said finally. Taste testing. Temporary. Miles inclined his head. Temporary is a good start. She pointed at him slightly. You don't get to turn this into something else without asking. Noted. And I mean it. I believe you. She held his gaze for another second, then dropped her hand. All right, she said, quieter now. All right. The agreement sat between them, not grand, not formal, but solid in its own way. Miles stood after a moment, brushing his hands together lightly. I'll let you get some rest, he said. You don't have to leave, Noah said immediately. Yeah, Emma added. You can stay a little. Lauren looked at them, then at Miles. He hesitated just long enough to make it a choice. All right, he said. He sat back down, not too close, not too far. And for a while, the room held something new, something not quite defined yet, but steady and unmistakable. Not obligation, not coincidence, just the beginning of something that had chosen to exist. Chapter 4, The Rhythm of Small Things. Lauren Hale did not like needing things. She liked control. She liked knowing exactly how far her resources would stretch, how much she could rely on herself, and where the limits were before disaster stepped in uninvited. Control had kept her afloat longer than it should have, and she trusted it more than she trusted people, which made the idea of walking into Miles Kennedy's diner, of all places, feel absurdly complicated. You're overthinking it, Emma said, watching her from the narrow sofa that had clearly seen too many long nights. I'm not overthinking it, Lauren replied, adjusting the cuff of her sleeve for the third time without noticing. You are, Emma said. You've been standing there for 10 minutes. Lauren glanced down at her shoes, then at the door, then at the clock on the wall. It's been 8, she said. Emma raised an eyebrow. Lauren frowned faintly. Fine. Feels like 10. Noah appeared from the hallway, already halfway into his sneakers. Are we going or not? Lauren looked at both of them, their expectant faces far too united for her comfort. This is a transaction, she said, mostly to herself. That's all it is. Emma didn't even bother responding to that. The bell over the diner door chimed as they stepped inside, and the warm scent of coffee and something buttery wrapped around them almost immediately. Lauren paused just inside the entrance. It wasn't what she expected. There was nothing polished or overly curated about the place. No attempt to impress or overwhelm. It simply existed. Clean, warm, lived in. The kind of place where people lingered longer than they intended. Felt annoyingly comfortable. Noah! A voice called from across the room. Lauren blinked as Miles stepped out from behind the counter, a dish towel slung over his shoulder, his expression unchanged except for the quiet recognition in his eyes. Noah grinned instantly. We came. I can see that, Miles said. Good timing. Emma crossed her arms loosely. We said we'd come. Miles nodded. That you did. His gaze shifted then, landing briefly on Lauren. No fanfare, no overreaction, just a simple acknowledgement. Morning, he said. Lauren hesitated just for a second before answering. Morning. There was something disarming about the way he didn't make it more than that. Go ahead, pick a booth, Miles added. I'll be there in a minute. Noah didn't need telling twice. He slid into the nearest empty booth like he'd been coming here for years. Emma followed, slower but curious. Lauren took one last glance around, then joined them. This is weird, Emma murmured, leaning in slightly. Lauren nodded. It is. But neither of them sounded particularly opposed. Miles approached a minute later, setting down 3 glasses of water before speaking. So, he said, resting his hands lightly against the edge of the table. Taste testers. Lauren straightened slightly. Temporary. Miles inclined his head. Temporary taste testers. That's better. A hint of something. Approval, maybe, flickered across her expression. Miles glanced at Noah. Got any preferences? Everything, Noah said immediately. Emma snorted. That's not helpful. It is if you think about it, Noah argued. Miles nodded seriously. Fair point. Lauren watched the exchange, something unfamiliar pulling at the edges of her focus. Ease. That was the word for it. Nobody was trying too hard. Nobody was performing. All right, Miles said. I'll bring a few options. We're not ordering, Lauren reminded him. You're not, he said easily. You're evaluating. There's a difference. Exactly. She opened her mouth to respond, then stopped. He wasn't dismissing her. He wasn't pushing back. He was agreeing in a way that didn't feel like giving ground. That's irritating, she muttered. Emma's lips twitched. I kind of like it. Lauren gave her a look. Of course you do. The food came out in waves. Nothing overwhelming, nothing excessive. Small portions arranged with quiet intention. Soup first, then grilled sandwiches cut neatly in half. a side of roasted potatoes that smelled far better than they had any right to. Noah didn't wait for permission this time. He dug in immediately, his approval evident in the way he didn't speak. Emma took a more measured approach, tasting each thing like she actually meant to give feedback. Lauren observed longer than either of them. "How is it?" Miles asked after a moment. Emma nodded slowly. "Good. That's not helpful," he said, mirroring her earlier comment. She blinked, caught off guard, then smiled despite herself. "It's balanced," she said, searching for the word. "It doesn't feel heavy." Miles nodded once. "That's the idea." Noah looked up. "The potatoes are the best." "I will accept that review," Miles said. Lauren finally took a bite of the sandwich. It wasn't complicated, but it was right. The kind of right that didn't need decoration. She exhaled quietly. "Well?" Miles asked. She looked up at him, then back at the plate. "It's good," she admitted. "That sounded painful," he said. It was a neutral observation. "That's one way to phrase it." Lauren narrowed her eyes slightly. "Do you always do that?" "Do what?" "Make everything sound easy." Miles considered it. "I don't think I make it easy." "No, I just don't make it harder." Emma let out a quiet laugh. "That's actually true." Lauren looked at her daughter, then back at Miles. "That shouldn't work," she said. "And yet," he replied. She shook her head faintly, but there was less resistance in it now. By the time the plates were mostly empty, the space around them had relaxed in a way Lauren hadn't expected. Noah was asking questions about how things were made. Emma had shifted from evaluating to simply enjoying. And Miles moved through it all with the same steady presence he'd had in the hospital, but here it felt different. Lighter. At one point, an older woman approached the table, her eyes lighting up immediately. "You must be the new ones," she said. Lauren blinked. "I'm sorry. I'm his mother," the woman added, pointing toward Miles with clear affection. "That explains a lot," Emma muttered under her breath. Lauren shot her a quick look before offering a polite smile. "Nice to meet you." "You too," the woman said warmly. "I've heard all about you." Lauren paused. "You have?" She nodded. "Heroic rescue, mysterious calm, food delivery. Quite the introduction." Lauren glanced at Miles, who looked entirely unbothered. "I didn't realize I'd been summarized," Lauren said. "I keep it simple," he replied. His mother smiled knowingly. "He does everything simple." "That's not entirely accurate," Miles said. "Close enough," she countered. Lauren watched the exchange, something softening in her chest before she could stop it. It wasn't just him. It was the way he fit here. How everything around him seemed to move in quiet alignment without effort. "That's dangerous," she murmured. Miles glanced at her. "What is this?" she said, gesturing vaguely. "Food. The whole thing." He followed her gaze for a moment, then looked back at her. "It's just a place." "No," Lauren said quietly. "It's not." He didn't argue. He just nodded, once, like he understood more than she'd said. When they stood to leave, the shift wasn't dramatic. No declarations. No expectations. Just a natural pause in something that didn't feel finished yet. "We'll come back," Noah said immediately. Emma nodded. "For more evaluating." Lauren hesitated. Then, almost despite herself, she said, "We'll see." Miles offered a faint smile. "That works." It did. And as they stepped back out into the world beyond the little diner on Maple Street, Lauren found herself thinking something she hadn't allowed in a long time. Maybe not everything that felt steady was something she had to fight against. Some things might just be worth stepping into. Chapter 5: Friction Without Fire. The second time Lauren went to the diner, she told herself it was for practical reasons. The third time, she didn't bother explaining it at all. Routine had a way of building quietly, almost invisibly. One visit became 2, then 3, and before Lauren noticed the shift, there was a rhythm to it. Something that threaded itself into her days without asking permission. She didn't like that. Or at least she told herself she didn't. "This doesn't change anything," she said one afternoon, sliding into their now unspoken usual booth. Miles glanced up from where he'd been setting down fresh silverware. "That's a broad statement." "It's an accurate one." Emma rolled her eyes lightly as she followed Lauren in. "She's doing it again." "I'm not doing anything," Lauren said. "You do that voice," Emma replied. "Like you're trying to convince yourself." Lauren opened her mouth, then stopped, narrowing her eyes instead. "You're very comfortable with psychoanalyzing me." "I've had practice," Emma said evenly. Noah hopped into the booth across from them, entirely unconcerned. "Are we getting the potatoes again?" "Evaluation," Lauren said automatically. "Right." Noah nodded. "Evaluating the potatoes." Miles leaned slightly against the end of the booth, faint amusement threading through his expression. "They've tested well so far." "They've exceeded expectations," Noah corrected. Miles nodded. "High praise." Lauren pressed her lips together, but the edges of her resistance were softer than they used to be. "That's exactly the problem," she said. Miles tilted his head. "Which part?" "All of it," she replied. gesturing lightly around the diner. This is too easy. He didn't answer immediately. That was something Lauren had started to notice about him. He rarely rushed to fill space. He let thoughts settle before responding, as if he considered silence part of the conversation instead of something to avoid. Easy isn't the same as wrong, he said finally. No, Lauren countered. But it's usually misleading. How so? She leaned back slightly, crossing her arms. Because things that feel easy tend to get complicated later. Miles nodded once. That can happen. It does happen, she corrected. Sometimes, he said. Lauren exhaled slowly, frustration flickering. Not sharp, but persistent. That's what I mean, she said. You keep doing that. Doing what? You don't disagree in a way that actually pushes back, she said. You just soften it. Miles considered that. I'm not trying to soften anything. It feels like it. That might just be how it sounds when I don't argue. The words landed somewhere between explanation and deflection. Lauren studied him, searching for irritation. Any sign that he'd push harder if she did. There wasn't one. That, more than anything, unsettled her. Most people would have picked a fight by now, she said. About what? She gestured vaguely again. About this. About me questioning it. Miles shrugged lightly. You're not wrong to question things. Lauren blinked. That's not helpful, she said. It's not meant to be helpful, he replied. It's just accurate. Emma let out a quiet laugh. See? He does that thing. Lauren shot her a look, but there was no real heat behind it this time. Why don't you just say it? Lauren pressed, her gaze returning to Miles. If you think I'm overcomplicating this, just say that. Miles met her eyes evenly. I don't think you're overcomplicating it. Then what do you think? He leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms against the table. I think you're used to things not staying easy, he said. So when something is, you're preparing for when it won't be. The words weren't pointed. They weren't heavy, but they were precise. Lauren felt them land before she could stop them. She looked away first. That's a convenient interpretation, she murmured. Miles didn't react to the deflection. It's an observation. Emma watched her quietly, her expression softening in a way that made Lauren uncomfortable for entirely different reasons. You don't have to decide anything right now, Emma said, gentler than before. Lauren frowned. I'm not deciding anything. Exactly. That earned her another look, but it didn't turn into an argument. That was the strange part. Nothing with Miles turned into an argument. Conversations edged close, circled tension, but never tipped into conflict. It was like trying to start a fire in a room where the air refused to catch. Lauren wasn't sure what to do with that. Later that afternoon, after Emma had wandered off to inspect the pie selections and Noah had been coaxed into helping in the kitchen, Lauren found herself standing near the counter, watching Miles refill a coffee cup. You don't push, she said. Miles set the pot down. No reason to. There's always a reason. Not always. Lauren leaned against the counter, arms crossed again, a defensive posture she'd stopped noticing. If someone pushes you away, she said, don't you ever push back? Miles thought about it. Depends. On what? Whether they actually want space, he said. Or whether they're just expecting me to leave. Lauren went still. The quiet between them shifted, subtle, but undeniable. And if it's the second one? She asked. Then I don't leave right away. That wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a promise. It was something quieter. Something chosen. Lauren looked at him fully then, trying to find the limit. The point where he'd stop. The edge where his patience ran out or his calm turned into something more forceful. She couldn't find it. That's not how people work, she said. It's how I work, he replied. That's risky. Miles nodded. Sometimes. And you're just okay with that? I'm okay with deciding what I'm willing to risk. Lauren tightened her arms slightly, her defenses shifting rather than falling. You barely know me. I know enough to stand here and have this conversation, he said. That's not the same thing. No, he agreed. It's not. That should have frustrated her more. Instead, it left her searching for the next argument and coming up short. You're not supposed to make this easy, she said finally, quieter now. Miles tilted his head faintly. I'm not trying to make it anything. That's worse. Why? Because then I can't blame you for it, she said. For the first time, something like genuine amusement flickered more clearly across his face. That does limit your options, he said. Lauren exhaled a short breath that almost turned into a laugh before she caught it. Almost. She shook her head, pushing away from the counter. This is exactly what I mean. Miles didn't stop her. He didn't follow. He just watched her go, with the same steady presence that had been there from the start. And somehow that made it harder to walk away than if he tried to. When they finally left that evening, the air outside felt cooler, sharper. Emma slipped her hands into her jacket pockets. You're not mad. It wasn't a question. Lauren stared straight ahead. No. Confused. Emma tried. Maybe. Emma nodded like that made sense. That's new. Lauren huffed faintly. Don't get used to it. Noah skipped a few steps ahead, entirely unconcerned with any of it. For a moment, Lauren let herself glance back through the diner window. Miles was already moving again, wiping down the counter, resetting the space like he always did. Like nothing fragile had just shifted. Like nothing needed to be fixed. Lauren looked away first, but the thought stayed with her all the way home, pressing gently at the edges of something she kept tightly controlled. If he wasn't going to push, then maybe the real question wasn't what he would do next. It was what she would do when he didn't. Chapter 6, the problem with almost, it didn't happen all at once. There was no single moment where Lauren Hale suddenly decided that something had shifted beyond her control. No dramatic realization, no defining event that split her life neatly into before and after. It was quieter than that. More inconvenient. It happened in the spaces she wasn't paying attention to. Miles noticed it first in the pauses. Lauren had always filled silence with something. Questions, observations, resistance. Even when she leaned back, arms crossed, she kept the conversation moving like she didn't trust what would happen if it stopped. But now, sometimes she didn't. Sometimes she just sat there. Like she wasn't bracing for what came next. He didn't point it out. He didn't do anything, really. He kept doing exactly what he had been doing all along. "You're late," Lauren said one evening, sliding into their booth. Miles glanced at the clock behind the counter. "By 2 minutes. That's late." "That's precise," he corrected. She narrowed her eyes slightly. "You're not supposed to correct the person calling you late." "Why not?" "Because then I could escalate it," she said. "This was your chance to avoid trouble." Miles leaned lightly against the edge of the booth, folding his arms. "You don't seem like someone who needs help escalating." Emma snorted quietly into her glass. Lauren shot her a look before turning back to Miles. "That's not the point." No, she said. "The point is, you're slipping." Miles tilted his head, considering. "Or you're expecting consistency in something that doesn't actually matter." "That's worse," Lauren replied. "At least slipping would make sense." Emma leaned forward slightly. "You're arguing about 2 minutes," she pointed out. "I'm establishing standards," Lauren said. "For what?" Lauren opened her mouth, paused, then sighed. "I don't know," she admitted. The words sat there, unexpected, honest. Miles didn't comment on it. He just nodded once, like it fit into the conversation naturally. That seemed to unsettle her more than anything else. Later, when Emma had wandered off again and Noah had managed to convince someone in the kitchen to let him assist, Lauren leaned back and watched Miles move around the diner. "You don't change," she said. It wasn't accusatory. It wasn't even sharp. Just curious. Miles glanced over. "In what way?" "In any way," she said. "You're exactly the same every time I come in here." "That's not entirely true." "No?" she asked. "No," he said. "Sometimes I make different soup." She stared at him. Then, despite herself, a quiet laugh slipped out before she could catch it. "That's not what I meant," she said. "I know." "Then answer the question." Miles walked over, setting a fresh cup of coffee in front of her before responding. "I don't see a reason to change the parts of myself that already work," he said. "That's not how most people operate." "No," he agreed. "It's not." Lauren wrapped her hands loosely around the warm mug, staring down into it. "That has to make things easier," she said. "Sometimes," he replied. "And the rest of the time? It makes things clearer." Lauren frowned faintly. "Clear how?" Miles leaned against the booth again, his tone steady as ever. "It helps you figure out who's actually there for you," he said, "and who just liked the version of you that was easier to deal with." The words landed harder than he intended, or maybe exactly as intended. Lauren went very still. "And which one am I?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Miles didn't hesitate. "You're someone who hasn't decided yet." She looked up sharply. "That's a convenient answer." "It's an accurate one." "Is it?" she pressed. Miles met her gaze evenly. "You're still here." That shouldn't have meant anything, but it did. Lauren looked away first, exhaling slowly. "That doesn't mean anything," she said. "It might," he replied. "Or it might just mean this is temporary." Miles nodded once. "It might. And you're okay with that?" "I'm okay with letting things be what they are while they are." Lauren laughed softly, but there was no humor in it this time. "That's not how this works," she said. "How does it work?" She hesitated. Then, more quietly, "People expect things. Eventually, yeah. And you don't." Miles considered it. "I expect people to be who they are," he said. "Everything else comes after that." Lauren shook her head faintly. "That's not how relationships work." "That's been my experience," he replied. "That sounds like a good way to end up alone." Miles didn't flinch at that. "Sometimes," he said. "And you're just fine with that?" "I'm fine with not forcing something that isn't right," he said. "Even if that means being alone for a while." "A while," Lauren echoed. "You're 36. I'm aware. And you've never," she paused, searching for the right phrasing, "come close to anything serious?" "No," Miles said simply. Lauren frowned. "Why?" He didn't answer immediately. Not because he didn't have one, but because he wanted to say it clearly. Because when people decided they could take or leave me, he said, they usually left. The honesty of it settled between them, quiet but undeniable. Lauren's grip tightened slightly around the mug. And you just accepted that? She asked. I noticed it, he corrected, and decided I wasn't interested in being optional. Something in her expression shifted. Sharp but not defensive. That's not what this is, she said quickly. Miles didn't argue. I didn't say it was, he replied. But you implied it. I didn't, he said, calm as ever. You did. Lauren blinked, caught off balance. That's, she stopped, pressing her lips together. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lauren exhaled slowly, her shoulders dropping just a fraction. That's exactly the problem, she said quietly. What is? You make it hard to avoid things, she admitted. Not by pushing, just by being there. Miles didn't respond immediately. He let that sit like he always did. You don't avoid things very well, he said finally. That's not true, she countered automatically. He raised an eyebrow slightly. Lauren exhaled again, softer this time. Okay, it's partially true. That's progress. She glanced up at him, a faint smile ghosting across her face despite everything. Don't get used to it. Wouldn't dream of it. That almost made her laugh again. Almost. But then the quiet returned. And this time she didn't fill it right away. You want to know what I think? She said after a moment. Miles nodded. Sure. I think this, she gestured lightly between them, vague but unmistakable, is the kind of thing that looks good for a while. And then, he asked. And then reality catches up, she said. People get tired. Things get complicated. Someone pulls back. Miles listened without interrupting. And you think that'll happen here? He asked. Lauren didn't answer immediately. I think it always happens, she said. Miles studied her for a moment. Then quietly, that's not the same thing. Lauren met his gaze, something tight and uncertain flickering behind her eyes. It is to me, she said. That was the closest she'd come to saying it outright. Not expectation, not certainty, but fear. Miles didn't move closer, didn't reach for her, didn't try to soften it. I'm not most people, he said. Lauren let out a small, humorless laugh. No, you're definitely not. And you're not easy, he added. Her eyes narrowed slightly. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be, he said. It just is. Another pause. And yet, he continued, I'm still here. Lauren looked at him, really looked this time. Not evaluating, not resisting, just seeing. That's the problem, she said quietly. No, Miles replied. That's the part you haven't decided about yet. The words didn't push. They didn't demand. They simply stayed where he put them. And for the first time, Lauren didn't try to argue them away. She just leaned back in the booth, staring at nothing in particular, her thoughts finally catching up to something she'd been trying to outrun since the night her life collided with his. Almost. That was the word that had always defined things for her. Almost stable. Almost enough. Almost safe. And now this steady, quiet, patient thing that refused to collapse under pressure. It didn't feel like almost. That was what made it hard. That was what made it dangerous. And as Lauren sat there, caught somewhere between stepping forward and pulling away, she realized something she hadn't planned on admitting. She didn't know how to walk away from something that hadn't given her a reason to. Chapter 7, Choosing on Purpose. The shift came quietly, the way most truths did in Lauren Hale's life, unannounced and inconvenient. It didn't arrive wrapped in clarity or certainty. It showed up in a moment that wasn't dramatic enough to mark the occasion, which made it harder to ignore. It happened on a Thursday, and it started with something simple going wrong. Don't move, Lauren said, already grabbing her bag as she crossed the small apartment. I'm not moving, Emma replied, though her voice was tight with discomfort. Noah hovered near the doorway, his usual restless energy replaced with something edged in worry. Is she okay? She's fine, Lauren said automatically. Emma winced. Lauren paused. Mostly fine, she amended. Emma sat stiffly on the couch, one hand pressed against her side, her breathing shallow in a way that immediately set Lauren on edge. When did this start? Lauren asked. This morning, Emma said. It wasn't that bad. And now? Emma didn't answer right away. That was answer enough. Lauren exhaled slowly, forcing her thoughts into order. We're going to urgent care, she said. Noah stepped closer. I'm coming too. You're both coming, Lauren replied, already moving toward the door. Let's go. The waiting room was too bright, too sterile, and far too slow. Emma leaned into the chair beside her, her usual composure worn thin by discomfort. Noah sat close on the other side, unusually quiet. Lauren checked the clock for the 5th time in as many minutes. This is ridiculous, she muttered. They're probably busy, Emma said, though her voice lacked conviction. That doesn't make it acceptable. It doesn't change anything either. Lauren sighed, pressing her lips together. She wasn't good at waiting. She was worse at not being able to fix something. This would have been easier if we had, she started, then stopped. A phone plan that wasn't barely holding together. Savings that weren't already stretched. Support that didn't feel like a trade-off. She didn't finish the thought. Emma glanced at her. What? Nothing, Lauren said quickly. Emma studied her but didn't push. The silence stretched again. And then, uninvited, unavoidable, a thought surfaced. Miles. Lauren closed her eyes briefly. No, that wasn't necessary. This was manageable. It was always manageable. She exhaled slowly, grounding herself. You don't need backup, she muttered under her breath. Noah looked at her. What? Nothing, she said again. 45 minutes later, nothing had changed except Emma's discomfort, which had sharpened into something harder to ignore. Lauren stood abruptly. I'm going to ask what's taking so long, she said. Mom, Emma started. I'll be right back. Lauren crossed the room with purpose, her patience officially gone. She spoke with the receptionist, calmly at first, then more firmly. It didn't feel productive. It didn't feel effective. It felt like pushing against something that refused to move. When she returned, Emma was watching her. That didn't help, did it? She asked. Lauren didn't answer immediately. No, she admitted. Emma nodded slightly, like she'd expected that. Another quiet stretched between them, and this time Lauren didn't fight it. She reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, stared at it. This was the part she hated. The part where she had to decide whether holding on to control mattered more than getting help. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Emma watched her carefully. It's okay, she said, softer now. You don't have to do everything alone. Lauren exhaled slowly. I know, she said. The words felt unfamiliar, but not untrue. She found his number, paused, then pressed call. Miles was in the middle of stacking plates when his phone buzzed. He wasn't expecting it. He glanced down, and something about the name on the screen shifted his attention immediately. He answered on the second ring. Lauren. There was no hesitation in his voice, just recognition. Lauren leaned back in her chair, trying to sound more composed than she felt. I wouldn't have called if it wasn't necessary, she said. That's usually when people call, Miles replied. That wasn't sarcasm. It was simple acknowledgement. She exhaled a small breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. We're at urgent care, she said. Emma's not feeling well, and it's taking longer than I expected. What do you need? He asked. No questions about why. No hesitation. Just that. Lauren closed her eyes briefly. I don't know, she admitted. She stopped. The words stalled somewhere between pride and honesty. Miles waited. I don't want to handle this alone right now, she said finally. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was steady. I'm on my way, he said. Lauren blinked. You don't have to. I know, he replied. The words landed exactly the way hers had, days ago. Quiet echo. Lauren let out a breath that felt different than before. Less tight, less defensive. Okay, she said. When Miles walked into the waiting room, nothing about his presence was loud or dramatic, but it changed the room anyway. Noah spotted him first. He's here, he said, relief immediate. Emma looked up, her expression easing just slightly. Lauren stood. Their eyes met. She didn't try to explain, didn't try to justify. You came, she said. Miles nodded once. You called. That was enough. He stepped closer, his attention shifting naturally to Emma. How are you doing? He asked. Better now, she said, managing a faint smile. That's a good sign, he replied. He didn't crowd, didn't take over. He simply filled in the space that had felt too wide a few minutes ago. Lauren watched it happen. Something quiet and undeniable settling into place. You didn't ask if this was really necessary, she said to him. Miles glanced at her. You wouldn't have called if it wasn't. That's a lot of trust. It's not trust, he said. It's observation. Lauren let out a small breath. Right, she said. That thing you do. He tilted his head slightly. It seems to work. It does, she admitted. The words came easier now. That was new. When Emma was finally called back, Lauren stood automatically. But this time, she hesitated. There's only room for one, the nurse said. Lauren started forward, then paused. She looked at Emma, then at Miles. You go, Emma said. Lauren frowned. I should. You've been here the whole time, Emma interrupted gently. Let him sit with me. It's fine. Lauren hesitated. This wasn't about capability. It was about choice, about letting someone else step into a moment she would normally hold on to, even when it cost her. She looked at Miles. You sure? She asked. He didn't overthink it. Yeah, he said. Simple. Certain. Lauren stepped back. Okay, she said. The waiting room felt different with Emma gone. Quieter. More exposed. Lauren sat down slowly, her hands resting loosely in her lap. For a few minutes, neither she nor Noah spoke. Then Noah leaned against her side. He's good at this, he said quietly. Lauren glanced down at him. At what? Being there, Noah replied. Lauren smiled faintly. Yeah, she said. He is. When Emma finally came back, with a diagnosis that was uncomfortable but manageable, Lauren felt the last of the tightness in her chest ease. Nothing serious. Nothing beyond immediate care. Everything. Okay. Miles stepped back easily once the crisis passed. No lingering, no claiming space that wasn't his. Just there until he wasn't needed in the same way. Lauren watched him as they stood to leave. You didn't try to fix anything, she said. Miles shrugged lightly. It wasn't mine to fix. And yet, she continued, you made it better. He met her gaze. That's different. Lauren studied him for a moment. Then slowly, deliberately, she nodded. Yeah, she said. It is. Outside, the evening air felt cooler, steadier. Noah stretched dramatically. I'm starving. That's not surprising, Emma said. Lauren glanced at Miles. He didn't ask, didn't suggest, didn't assume. He just stood there, present but not pressing. For the first time, the decision didn't feel like something she was being pushed toward or pulled into. It felt like something she could choose. On purpose. Diner? She said. Miles' expression didn't change much. But something quiet shifted in his eyes. Sounds good, he replied. Lauren nodded once. And as they started walking together. Not out of obligation, not out of habit, but because she had decided to step forward instead of holding back. Lauren realized something that didn't scare her the way it should have. This wasn't something that was happening to her. This was something she was choosing. Not because it was easy, but because it was worth it. Chapter 8. A different kind of love story. There was no moment where everything shifted all at once. No dramatic confession. No sweeping declaration that changed the course of everything in a single breath. That would have been easier to understand. Instead, it unfolded the way most things had between them, quietly, steadily, without asking for attention. And because of that, it mattered more. The diner had always belonged to Miles. Not just in the practical sense, ownership, routine, familiarity, but in the way it reflected him. Simple, grounded, steady. A place that didn't try too hard to be anything other than what it was. Lauren noticed the changes before he said anything about them. They weren't obvious. There was still the same hum of conversation, the same soft clatter of dishes, the same easy rhythm of people coming and going. But now there was a corner booth that seemed to be theirs without anyone ever saying it out loud. Now there were moments where Emma stood behind the counter, helping carry plates with a quiet competence she hadn't planned on developing. Now there were afternoons where Noah hovered near the kitchen, proudly useless but somehow always included. And now Lauren found herself standing there more often than she expected, no longer pausing at the door before stepping inside. That was the part that surprised her the most. She didn't hesitate anymore. You're rearranging things? Lauren said one morning, watching as Miles adjusted a small stack of menus near the register. Miles glanced up. Am I? You moved those last week. I cleaned the counter, he replied. That's not the same thing. It's adjacent. Lauren narrowed her eyes slightly, but the edge wasn't as sharp as it used to be. Why? She asked. Miles considered it, then shrugged lightly. Seemed like it needed to be done. That wasn't the answer she was looking for. She stepped closer, leaning against the counter. That's not really what I meant. I figured. Then answer the question I actually asked. Miles met her gaze. This was familiar now. The way she asked things, direct but not always obvious. The way she circled around what she meant, waiting to see if he would meet her there without forcing her to say it outright. It feels different now, he said. Lauren stilled slightly. Different how? Miles didn't look away. Not just mine anymore, he said. The words weren't heavy, but they carried weight. Lauren's breath caught just slightly before she could stop it. That's, she started, then stopped. He didn't rush to fill the silence. He never did. That wasn't something we agreed on, she said finally, her voice quieter now. Miles nodded. No, it wasn't. And you're just deciding that? I'm noticing it, he corrected. That's not the same thing. It is when it's already happening. Lauren let out a slow breath, her defenses shifting, not rising but adjusting in a way that felt unfamiliar. You're doing that again, she said. Doing what? Making something sound simple when it's not, she replied. Miles tilted his head slightly. Is it complicated? Yes, she said immediately. Why? The question should have been easy to answer. Lauren opened her mouth, then closed it again. Because for once, the complication didn't come from him. Came from her. Because it matters, she said finally. That was the truth. A simple, frustrating truth she hadn't wanted to say out loud before. Miles nodded once, like he'd expected that answer even if she hadn't. Yeah, he said. It does. There was no follow-up. No elaboration. Just acknowledgement. And somehow, that made it easier to stand there without needing to defend the feeling. Later that day, the diner settled into one of its quieter stretches. Emma sat at the end of the counter, sketching something absent-mindedly. Noah had disappeared into the back again, probably asking questions no one needed answers to. Lauren found herself at the window, watching the street outside without really seeing it. Miles came up beside her, not too close, not distant, just there. You're thinking, he said. Lauren smirked faintly. That's a dangerous observation. Usually is. She exhaled softly. I used to think I had everything figured out, she said. What worked? What didn't? What I should expect from people. And now? He asked. Lauren glanced at him. Now I'm not so sure that system was working as well as I thought. Miles nodded slightly. That happens. She gave him a look. You say that like it's normal. I think it is. Lauren leaned back against the window frame, crossing her arms, but the posture wasn't defensive anymore. Just familiar. You don't make this difficult, she said. I'm not trying to. I know, she replied. That's the problem. Miles raised an eyebrow slightly. Still a problem? Lauren paused. Then, slowly, she shook her head. No, she said. Not anymore. That was new. The words settled between them, quiet and steady. No tension followed. No hesitation pulled her backward. Just a simple, undeniable shift. Miles studied her for a moment. You decided, he said. Lauren exhaled softly, a faint smile touching her lips. Yeah, she admitted. I did. What changed? She looked at him fully then. Not guarded. Not uncertain. Just clear. You didn't, she said. Miles didn't react immediately. He didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked like he understood exactly what she meant. That seems to be working, he replied. Lauren laughed lightly, shaking her head. That shouldn't have been enough, she said. And yet, she echoed. Closing time came the way it always did, gradual, unremarkable, inevitable. Chairs stacked, lights dimmed, the last lingering customers drifting out into the night. But tonight, Lauren didn't leave when the doors locked. Neither did Emma or Noah. They stayed like it was the most natural thing in the world. No discussion, no expectation, just presence. Miles wiped down the counter the same way he always did. Except now, there were others moving in the space with him. Emma collected the stray menus. Noah carefully stacked napkins like it was a responsibility he took very seriously. Lauren stood behind the counter, watching it all. This is what you meant, she said. Miles glanced up. About what? This, she said, gesturing around them. Not just yours anymore. Miles set the cloth down. Yeah, he said. Lauren nodded slowly. She stepped closer, resting her hands lightly on the edge of the counter. You never tried to make it that way, she said. No. You never asked. No. She studied him, a quiet certainty settling into place. You just left room for it. Miles didn't respond right away. Then, softly, people step in when they want to. Lauren smiled, small but real. That's a risky way to build something. Miles shrugged. Seems to be working. She let out a soft laugh. That's becoming your answer for everything. Not everything. Most things. Close enough. The familiarity of it, the ease, it didn't feel unexpected anymore. Felt earned. Lauren looked at him for a long moment. Then, without overthinking it, without second-guessing, she reached for his hand. It wasn't dramatic. Not hesitant either. Just deliberate. Miles' fingers closed around hers without surprise, like he'd been prepared for the moment whenever it came. Lauren exhaled softly. This still feels new, she admitted. It is, he said. But it doesn't feel temporary. Miles tilted his head slightly. That's good. She nodded. Yeah, she said. It is. The quiet between them settled again. But this time, it wasn't filled with uncertainty. It wasn't something waiting to shift. It simply existed. Steady. Chosen. Real. Across the diner, Emma glanced up from where she stood, catching the moment without interrupting it. She smiled faintly. Noah noticed next. Are we staying? He asked. Lauren glanced over at them, then back at Miles. She didn't hesitate. Yeah, she said. We are. Miles squeezed her hand gently. And for once, nothing about the future felt like something she needed to brace against. Because this wasn't a story about almost. It wasn't built on uncertainty or waiting for something to fall apart. It was something quieter than that, stronger than that, not chosen by accident, not held together by hope alone, but built carefully, deliberately, by two people who understood exactly what it meant to stay, and decided to anyway. Epilogue, 3 years later, the bell over the D. The door still chimed the same way it always had. Some things, Miles believed, didn't need to change to grow. It was a warm afternoon when the bell rang again, letting in a small rush of sunlight and the familiar chaos of voices that followed it. Careful, Noah. If you knock that over, you're cleaning it up this time, Lauren called without looking up from where she stood behind the counter. I heard that, Noah said, already halfway through doing exactly what she'd warned him about. You were supposed to hear that, she replied. Emma, now taller and sharper in ways that made it hard to remember how small she had felt 3 years ago, leaned against the counter with a faint smile. He never listens until it actually happens. That's a learning style, Noah defended. That's a disaster waiting to happen, Emma corrected. Miles watched it all unfold from his usual place near the register, wiping down the counter with slow, practiced movements. His expression didn't change much, but his eyes softened in a way they hadn't used to. This was what it looked like now. Louder than before. Fuller. And exactly right. You're enjoying this, Lauren said, glancing over at him. Miles didn't deny it. It's efficient. She raised an eyebrow. Efficient. Everyone's exactly where they need to be, he said. That's your definition of efficient? It works. Lauren shook her head, but the smile that followed made it clear she wasn't arguing. That answer is still irritating, she said. Consistent, he corrected. Still irritating. Also consistent. Emma let out a quiet laugh. You two have been having the same argument for 3 years. It's not an argument, Miles said. It's not resolved, Emma pointed out. That doesn't make it an argument. Lauren leaned against the counter, closer to him now without thinking about it. That's also still irritating, she added. Miles glanced at her, that faint, familiar hint of amusement appearing again. Seems to be working. Lauren huffed softly, but her hand found his on the counter anyway, fingers slipping naturally into his. That part never felt forced. Not in the beginning. Not now. Not ever. The framed photo by the register caught the light as someone shifted past it. Emma noticed it first, rolling her eyes affectionately. Do you ever think about replacing that? She asked. Lauren followed her gaze. The photo wasn't formal. It wasn't posed. It had been taken by someone who hadn't warned them, capturing a moment mid-laugh, Miles slightly off-center, Lauren looking at him instead of the camera, Noah leaning into the frame with too much energy, and Emma trying not to smile but failing anyway. It had been taken on the day of the wedding. Small. Simple. Exactly the way they wanted it. No, Lauren said finally. I think it's perfect. Miles nodded once. It is. Emma smirked faintly. Of course you do. That's because it's accurate, he said. To what? Noah asked, appearing suddenly at the counter again. Miles glanced at him. To how things actually are. Noah leaned in, studying the photo like he'd never seen it before. That was a good day, he said. It was, Lauren agreed. And we got cake twice, Noah added. That's your main takeaway? Emma asked. There was a lot of cake, Noah said firmly. That's fair, Miles said. Lauren shook her head, smiling despite herself. Some things didn't change. Later that afternoon, when the diner settled into its quieter rhythm, Miles stepped outside briefly, the familiar sidewalk stretching out in front of him. 3 years. It didn't feel like a long time. It didn't feel short either. It just felt anchored. The sound of the door opening behind him pulled his attention back. Lauren stepped out, folding her arms loosely as she leaned beside him. You disappeared, she said. Stepped out, he corrected. For someone who doesn't over-explain, that's very specific wording. Miles tilted his head slightly. You notice things. I do, she said. You taught me that. He glanced at her. I don't think I taught you that. You did, she insisted. You just didn't realize it. That made sense to him. Most things between them had worked that way. Lauren looked out at the street for a moment, the same place where everything had started, though it felt like a different lifetime now. You remember that night? She asked. Miles didn't need to ask which one she meant. Yeah, he said. I almost didn't call you that day at urgent care, she admitted. I know. Lauren frowned slightly. You do. You don't like needing people, he said. I didn't, she corrected. Miles glanced at her. She held his gaze. I don't mind it anymore, she added quietly. That was still something she noticed, the difference between needing and choosing. He nodded once like that was enough. Because it was. Lauren bumped her shoulder lightly against his. You also never said anything about the adoption. Miles blinked faintly. What do you mean? You asked them before you asked me, she said. That seemed appropriate. Lauren stared at him. That seemed appropriate? She repeated. They're part of it, he said simply. They were already calling you Dad, she pointed out. I noticed. Lauren laughed softly. Of course you did. Miles leaned back slightly against the wall. It didn't seem like something I needed to correct. She shook her head, a smile pulling at her lips. They didn't tell you they were doing it at school for a week before they told me, she said. That sounds like them. It does, she agreed. There was a quiet pause. Your parents were very excited, she added. Miles nodded. They were. They still mention the no diapers part like it's a personal achievement. That was important to them. Lauren laughed lightly. I think your mom cried more than I did, she said. That also makes sense. Another pause, but an easy one. Lauren looked back toward the diner door, where the faint sound of Noah's voice carried through the glass. They didn't just gain a dad, she said quietly. They gained all of this. Miles followed her gaze. The diner, the routine, the steady, familiar rhythm that had shaped his life, and now theirs. They chose it too, he said. Lauren looked back at him. No, she said softly. You gave them the space to. Miles didn't argue. He'd learned that sometimes her way of saying things wasn't about precision. It was about meaning, and the meaning was clear. Inside, Emma was explaining something to one of the regulars. Noah had somehow ended up behind the counter again. Miles's mother was mid-story, clearly enjoying the audience. Lauren stepped back through the door first. Miles followed. Nothing about it felt temporary. Nothing about it felt uncertain. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't overwhelming. It didn't need to be. It was built the way everything between them had been built. Steady. Deliberate. Chosen. Lauren glanced at him once more as they moved back into the rhythm of the afternoon. You know, she said, this still shouldn't have worked. Miles smiled faintly. And yet, she shook her head. But she was smiling too. And across the diner, Noah looked up and called out without hesitation. Dad, can you help me with this? Miles didn't miss a beat. Yeah, he said. Be right there. And just like that, without effort, without doubt, without anything left to prove, everything was exactly where it belonged.